How many of you would join in with me right now and try to fix the buzz? You all okay with that? Okay, we're having an issue with the battery backups in our lights, so they're going to play with the lights for a minute to try to reset it so that we can have as little distraction as possible. Every one of those lights has to have a battery backup, and they unfortunately need to be upgraded. So we're in the process of that, but as you can tell, there's a reason they need to be upgraded, because they buzz. And normally it goes away by now, but it is not working. So you guys can keep messing with them. I think everyone's on board with trying to get rid of it. And while they try to do that, you can turn in your Bibles to Daniel chapter 2, and I'll make one highlight announcement this morning. If you are interested in receiving one of these either red, white, or green Calvary mugs, you can actually drink more than just coffee out of this. You could drink hot cider or tea. Some people like to drink warm water. I don't know, but they do. You can drink any of those things right out of here. If you'd like one of these, if you were to donate $10 to Operation Christmas Child, you would receive a mug of your color choice of the three available. And so if that interests you, you could give $10 to Operation Christmas Child, track a box, money can go to packing boxes, things like that. You would receive a mug in return. You can do that right at the church office starting tomorrow if you're interested in that. So hopefully you both paid attention and got to Daniel chapter 2. I did not. I need to do that. That'd be helpful, right? Okay. So we're going to pick up in the book of Daniel, and again, I apologize for the lighting situation and the buzz. I will try to drown out that buzz and keep your attention today. Daniel chapter 2 is where Pastor John started and got us halfway through last week. And let me just bring you up to speed as a reminder of where we're at. Daniel is now serving in Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar. And what happened last week in Scripture was that the king had a dream. No one could interpret that dream. And the king, who's a ruthless ruler, should have everything that he wants at his disposal, including the interpretation of any random dream, right? So he is angry that nobody can interpret this dream. And he's so frustrated that he actually says, I want all of the wise men in Babylon put to death, because he's that upset. And Daniel says, hold on, give me some time. I think I have the solution. That solution was God revealing the interpretation of that dream to Daniel. So that's where we're at. Daniel is actually he's facing death from Nebuchadnezzar because he's one of these wise men in Babylon. But he buys more time. And today we are going to look at how Daniel delivers the truth. So he's standing firm, delivering the truth, but he's doing that while pointing to God or pointing to Christ. So for us, that's our lesson for today. How do we stand firm, deliver the truth, but point to God while doing it? And you may have heard in your lifetime, usually it's attributed to a grandmother or a mother, where they say, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it at all, right? Have you guys heard that before? Well, that's partially true. Yes, there's a lot of times that many of us should probably hold our tongues, right? But then there's also the other part of that where it's the truth hurts, right? Sometimes just the flat out truth, it's gonna hurt someone's feelings. Both of those are true, but not fully true. I think in the Christian community, we take way too much liberty with delivering bold truth without any part of the heart caring for how that person is receiving it. And I want us to see today in Daniel that Daniel does a wonderful job of declaring truth without compromise, but in a way that points someone to God. So let's recap of what we've learned so far in Daniel's life, because I believe that there are 4 things that we've already learned from Daniel that allow us to see how Daniel was equipped to stand firm in the truth. We saw in chapter 1 that Daniel was resolved to live holy. He was going to stand firm no matter what. That was his declaration. We saw later in chapter 1 that Daniel trusted God above fear. Instead of being scared to present the truth, he said, God has got this no matter what happens to me. We're going to see that later on in Daniel 2 with some other people, but we know that Daniel trusted God above fear. We also saw in chapter 2 last week that Daniel responded with gentleness. Sometimes when we are declaring the truth, we aren't very gentle. But Daniel, as a basis of who he is, he was resolved to declare the truth, but he was going to do it with gentleness. And then we also saw last week that Daniel sought God's wisdom. It wasn't Daniel creating all of these wonderful things to say. He trusted God for the wisdom of the truth that came out of his mouth. So all of these things were in place that allowed Daniel to interpret the dream of the king in an accurate way and in a way that was careful. It's important because it shows us how valuable and important our daily walk with Christ is. Are we constantly seeking him for wisdom? Are we constantly trusting him over any circumstance or any fear? We see that from Daniel, which is how we know our walk with the Lord is so important. In Daniel 2:30, listen to what he says. But as for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because of any wisdom that I have more than all the living, but in order that the interpretation may be known to the king, and that you may know the thoughts of your mind. This whole interpretation wasn't about Daniel. It was so that the king would be pointed to God. Daniel didn't take credit for the wisdom, because if he would have taken credit, then God wouldn't have been glorified. Daniel's motivation was not for promotion or to get recognition, because if he would have done that, then God would not have been glorified. So the whole plan of God was that he was going to use Daniel to glorify himself so that the king wouldn't look at Daniel, but he would look past Daniel at who the main figure is, which is God. We see in Daniel 2:20 that he says, "Let the name of God be blessed forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to him." That is the basis for how Daniel is able to stand firm, deliver the truth in love and grace and wisdom. So what we're going to do today is we're going to read Daniel, the rest of Daniel chapter 2, but we're going to do it in sections, okay? So I'm not going to have you stand every time and up and down, and some people may get dizzy, and we don't need Pastor Dennis repeating last week. So, I know, I can't let it go. I'm sorry. I tease because I care. He knows that. So we're going to read a few verses at a time. We're going to see what Daniel did in that section or what the king did. Then we're going to read some more. So you're welcome to stand if you prefer, but you don't need to feel like you have to. We're going to start in verse 31 of Daniel chapter 2 and read through verse 36. "You saw, O king, and behold, a great image. This image, mighty and of exceeding brightness, stood before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of this image was of fine gold, and its chest and arms of silver, its middle and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked, a stone was cut out by no human hand, and it struck the image on its feet of iron and clay and broke them into pieces. And they became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away so that there was not a trace of them that could be found. But the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream. Now we will tell the king of its interpretation." So what we see in these first few verses here is that Daniel simply repeats the dream. He's not providing any explanation or interpretation at this point. He is simply stating to the king what the dream was, detail for detail. This is important here because what this does is it shows the king that it wasn't Daniel hearing from other people what they had heard the dream was. He wasn't trying to conjure up anything else except the facts. And the content of the dream was purely given to Daniel by God. Fully 100% by God, the content of that dream came to Daniel. And he starts the whole process by telling the king, here's what you saw. What this does is it brings validity to the fact that God is the one in charge. God is the one and only the one that could have known the mind of the king, every detail of that dream, and Daniel repeats it to him. So you have to understand, here's this powerful, ruthless person who has everything at their disposal. That's the king. And now he has someone standing in front of him saying, I know exactly what your dream was. That pointed to God because no one else could have known those details. So what was the dream? We read it, but let me recap it. There's a massive statue made of lots of different materials. There was gold and silver and bronze and iron, and then there's iron mixed with clay. So there's this huge statue in his dream, all different components as it goes from top to bottom. And then all of a sudden in this dream, a stone is cut out, not by a man, not by any human hand, and that stone destroys the statue. And then that stone becomes a mountain that fills the entire earth. Those are the facts of the dream. Those are the facts that Daniel repeated to the king. So there's not a lot of information here, but two things that I want you to see. One, Daniel didn't expand on the truth. Daniel didn't leave out any truth. Daniel told the king exactly what he was told by God. Doesn't confuse the message, doesn't take away or add to the message. He declared the truth exactly how God told him. The second thing I want you to see is the great communication skill that Daniel used. Some of you may have gone through this in your pre-marriage counseling or mentoring, where you say something and then you have the person repeat it back. What I heard you say is this. Daniel's kind of doing the same thing so that everyone's on the same page, right? He tells the king, here's what I heard, or here's what I saw in your dream. Giving the chance to the other person who's being communicated to rebuttal or clarify. Now, God is the one who gave Daniel this information. So there was no miscommunication here. But for us, as we learn to communicate with each other, repeating what we heard or saw so the other person can clarify is very important. But of course, God is the one with the details in this, so there's no correction needed. But what this does is now the king sees Daniel as a credible source. Wait a minute, what I saw in my mind, in my dream, you knew every detail? And now all of a sudden, King Nebuchadnezzar is understanding that there's something bigger here. This wasn't just Daniel playing a game or having a good guess at what the dream was. It gives him credibility. You see, he delivered the truth in a way that was respectful, not to fit his own agenda. He didn't leave anything out. There's a story of a freshman who went to college, and he wanted to impress his father, so he joined the track team. This kid had no athletic ability. The dad, however, was super proud because he was a track star in high school. So he thought, oh, my son is carrying on the tradition. But this son did not want to disappoint his father. This boy's first race was just a two-man race, and it happened to be against the best runner in school the previous year. He got destroyed. It wasn't even close. But he, again, didn't want to disappoint his father, so he wrote home. And he said this, "You will be happy to know that I ran against Bill Williams, the best runner in school. He came in next to last, while I came in second." Do you see the truth was there, right? It was a two-man race. Of course he came in second, and the other guy came in next to last. But he presented the truth in a way that fit his own agenda. He left out certain information that would have been crucial to the understanding of the truth, like it was only a two-man race. Daniel doesn't do that. So in these first 5 verses here that we read, Daniel gives the exact truth as God gave it to him without fitting his own agenda, without trying to self-protect. Because remember, he's speaking to a ruthless king, and he's staring death in the face because right now he's sentenced to death because the king is upset. But he delivers the truth exactly how God gives it to him. And I want you to notice something else if you look at verse 31. How does Daniel start this whole communication with the king? He looks at him and he says, "You saw, O king." That "O king" is such a respectful address to the king Nebuchadnezzar. He doesn't start out flippantly. He doesn't start out with anything except respect for the king. What do you think that does for the king? kind of builds him up, right? He goes, hey, this guy understands that I'm powerful. Some of us might say, I am not going to respect a leader like that. This guy is killing people left and right. I'm not going to show him any respect. But remember, Daniel is committed to not defile himself. He's committed to live a life that God would be glorified with his actions. And we can learn a lot from that, because while truth can be really hard, Daniel shows us, I'm going to be respectful because I don't want anything to get in the way of me giving the truth of God to this person.